Well, welcome to our annual AIM seminar. Can't believe it's another year. It seems to have gone very quickly, and what a year it was. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to our keynote speakers here today. Marcus Stuttard, head of AIM, who is a loyal supporter of this event. We're also very grateful to have Charlie Crawshay here today. Charlie is Deputy Director General of the Takeover panel. Many of you know Charlie. He's a long-standing and very well-respected member of the permanent staff at the panel.
As always though, if in doubt, please consult, and that's going to be my main theme today. The panel system is I think almost unique in this regard. It actively encourages people consulting. You never get into trouble with the panel if you consult. Now we're here to talk about AIM, and the big thing that happened in our world in relation to AIM companies a few years ago is that we abolished the so-called central management test. So it was felt important to only regulate companies where we had the ability to get our teeth into people, so to speak. That's where the central management test came from, and it was driven essentially by, tested by where the directors are located. When the Takeover directive came in, then for main list companies the central management test had to go, but we kept it for AIM companies because it essentially had always been there. But then under pressure from a number of parties, and most importantly investors, and they are after all who we're here to protect, all companies incorporated in the UK and traded on AIM are now subject to the code, and I think that's a good thing, and I hope you'd agree. We always like to remind you of the importance of when to make an announcement and when to consult with us. It really is an important area, and it's an area which it's important that you make sure your clients fully understand. Please remember this: there is a distinction between when you have to consult with the panel and when you have to make an announcement. And the rules about when you have to consult, those hard-line rules about 10% movements, they only apply about consultation. They are not the triggers for when you have to make an announcement. But the key thing is we need to be consulted, so we, the impartial referee, can make a decision as to whether an announcement is required. Be clear when essentially the obligation to consult kicks in. It kicks in if you're acting for an offeror, when you start first actively considering an offer, like when you are approaching third parties, when you're getting internal approvals. I say to people, it's when you we all know that companies look at other companies all the time, but it's when you take the file down from the top shelf, blow off the dust, and start generally thinking about how we're going to do this transaction. From that moment on, if the price moves 10% from the lowest point within that window, then you have to consult. End of, no discussion, black line test. You have to consult with us. When an approach gets made to the offeree company, then the obligation for consulting and making an announcement passes to the offeree company. Why? Because it's appropriate for an offeree to be responsible for informing its shareholders what's going on. And again, we're dealing with a 10% test from the lowest point from the time of the approach. A company gets an approach and rejects it unequivocally, the announcement obligation passes back to the offeror. My point to you about PUSU deadlines, though, is this is a very intense period. If it's all going to be fought out in the 28-day period, it's going to be very, very intense. So offerors, you want to think carefully before starting the offer period. There's material new information or significant new opinions that are given to one shareholder, they have to be given to everybody. And please remember that in the dynamics of the debate of a takeover, opinions are just as important as facts. We're now also saying that those roadshow presentations that get prepared, even if they don't contain any material new information or significant new opinions, they need to be available to everybody by being published on a website. Offerees cannot have calls or meetings with shareholders during the course of a bid unless those are pleased. But being pragmatic people, we're happy to turn that strict requirement off where the offer period is benign, i.e. And what do we mean by that? Where the transaction is recommended and there's a firm offer announcement out and there's no competing situation. But in those cases, we expect self-policing, so we want written confirmations this time from the clients themselves, and provided also they've had a proper briefing from the financial advisors.
One point that we've been talking to some brokers about in our broker roadshows is the formal sales process, which has been around for a while, but one of the reasons we're talking about is it's not used so much. And are you surprised by that?
In the UK, companies don't like necessarily putting themselves up for sale.
Yeah.
I think the approach that is preferred is get offer all one, locked in, get them to announce a firm offer, and then go and beat the bushes to see if anyone else is out there.
We've seen quite a few who sort of do a halfway house and say they're putting themselves up in a strategic review, and then they'll mention later on we may turn this into a formal sales process. So you sort of see a bit of you see that quite a bit.
It can come as a bit of a surprise to clients when they're on the buy side and they find that there's no warranty protection, and in fact the conditions that they can include there are limitations around them, and that can give rise to risks. The due diligence on a public deal is typically confirmatory in nature. It means you're not doing the sort of deep dive that you do on a private deal. So when you realise that you don't have a complete free hand around conditions, again, that, as I say, that can come as a bit of a surprise, and it can give rise to some risks. So you kind of need to know where you stand on this as you go into a process. Everything needs to be couched in objective terms. Certainly financing conditions are not normally permitted. You can only launch a bid when you have the cash resources in place to do it, and that means if you're borrowing money, it's got to be fully committed money. So there's quite a process that needs to be gone through to get comfortable on that. The bidder must then use all reasonable efforts to satisfy those conditions. There's a positive obligation to go out there and get them done, spend the money, do the work. It means you've got a plan for all of this. Proper planning is absolutely fundamental on a public takeover transaction. Panels certainly need to be consulted if you want to include a precondition, and if you want to go anywhere, anything beyond this, then that's where you actually do step into the Rule 2.4. It's a possible offer announcement is what you should actually be thinking about. What then is, what's going to be your ability to actually invoke that condition should those circumstances come to pass? It requires an adverse change of very considerable significance, striking at the heart of the purpose of the transaction. The panel looks at the long term, not the short term impact of the adverse change. And so where we kind of get to, and I think the key message that I want everyone to take away is that the working assumption for bidders should be that whilst you may have included these conditions, you may have negotiated them, the market expects that protective conditions will not be used.